Thank you, Kelvin, Debbie and Andy. We'll take the report as read, and is there anything else you want to add before we go to questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just really want to bring attention to all the elected members a couple of things. One is this particular item is a response to a request when the strategy was adopted in February, and want to remind councillors that the reason why we've adopted this strategy is to really mean that across the business we can be thinking about central city safety when we're engaging in projects that affect the central city area, and that the list that's been provided today will have, it will be slightly iterative as things occur across the course of the year. So the intention is that in 12 months' time we will have two lists before you. One will be things that we've achieved in this financial year, as well as next financial year. This is the list of activity that has already been identified across council as to occur. So today is really saying this is what's on our cards, but the greatest thing about us adopting this strategy is that across the business we are talking a lot more aligned, and there is a lot more awareness around the importance of taking safety as a consideration when we're planning and delivering the projects that we're involved in. Thanks, councillors.
Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. I've got a question about the lighting. 2.14 it talks about scope of lighting design and plan to improve. Oh, sorry, page 72. And 2.14 scope of lighting design and plan to improve visibility in Garden Place and Civic Square, which is unfunded, but I think it's terrific. It's great. I was in Broadbeach during our lovely break that we had in July, thanks to Mayor Andrew, and I was really impressed by the lighting in that area in terms of the imaginative nature of it, a change of colour and all that sort of stuff. It just well lit up the place, but it really brought something to it. I just wonder, we're probably talking functional here rather than anything else, but is there a possibility that we can step back and look at some, you know, taking a wider approach to lighting in the central city than just the functional sort of nature? I just wonder, like at cross council, can we sort of look at that somehow? I'm not quite sure what forum we could raise that, but I'd like to see it explored.
Yeah, so that's definitely possible, but it is currently unfunded. So
Yeah,
I have had the discussion with transportation, and there are plans to upgrade the lighting to LED, but there isn't funding to review the lighting, the existing lighting that's there, and put in new lighting. From what I understand, it wouldn't be a cheap thing to do.
Would it be a transportation issue, or would it be a case of Lance's department as well? Or I mean, who would look at, if we were looking at lighting in the central city in a different way? So
where I come in is that I'm, as part of, well, and Andy, as part of the strategy, we're sort of pulling together the strands of the different units that are involved. So transportation own the assets, which are the lights. Yep. So the budget sits with them, but obviously we are there to assist to make sure that the right things get addressed so that the considerations of the strategy are addressed as well.
Okay, I appreciate it's unfunded at the moment, but I guess I'm just hoping that when the time comes we're actually going to do something there, it would be nice to see us take a wider approach.
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing was just on page 71, just put my glasses back on, page number 1.6, the Your Help May Harm anti-begging campaign. Are we noticing any improvements in this area? Because I'm not really. Have you, in terms of the, you know, is this having any impact on the number of beggars you're seeing around?
Firstly, Your Help May Harm campaign, it's been a soft launch, and we're just looking to refresh that and look at a wider thing. So that's been dealt with by addressing individual businesses, an approach like that, as opposed to an all-out launch. So in actual fact, the impact of that into reducing the presence is no, currently.
Are you saying because we're in the early stages?
Because we're about to move into another phase of that, yes. That was it was deliberately planned that way.
Hasn't it been around a while?
There was an attempt to do some work 12, 18 months ago, but it never really got any traction.
So what can we expect, say, in 6 months' time? Like, what sort of progress on something like that?
Well, that's entirely up to the uptake by the community on the messaging that's contained in the Your Help May Harm campaign. The campaign is about trying to tell people that, or to say to people, there are some alternatives, and we're saying if you continue to give money to people, you encourage them to be there, you potentially trap them into a continuing presence, and you may in fact be looking to directly or indirectly funding an addiction issue that a number of them may have.
Can I just briefly ask you for your perception on what's actually happening with that begging? There's a suggestion around that there's a sort of organised begging ring, so to speak, in the CBD and wider, where people are actually being dropped off, etc. I mean, you must be on top of this. What's happening there? Not presence of organised in the manner that you're discussing. We have, on average, 12 to 15 people who are regular people who are on our streets. Firstly, those people, by and large, are not homeless. But they come into town. For some of them, they come in for a variety of reasons. Some it's for companionship, and they come and hang out with their mates. For some of them, it's to come in and to earn enough money to support an addiction. And for others, I'm sure that there are some who are operating in a sort of like a business. But we're not seeing the presence of the overt business model that you're talking about. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dove.
I've got 3 questions. First one was, were we planning to win Lotto in June 2019? Because most of the items here, that's when they're going to start by the look of it, or happen. What's with that? It's there through, look, sorry, I'm looking at page 71, 72. The start dates or the operational dates for anything that's not already started, just about.
The intention there, I guess, of the June 2019 is saying that the work is happening until that point, rather than that's only going to occur in that one specific month. So really, this plan is for the 2018-19 financial year, which ends June 19. So some of these projects will be completed at the end of this financial year. Others have a little bit more of a distinct date, which is why there's others other than just June.
Would have helped if it been a bit more descriptive of what was actually, when it was actually happening.
Yep.
Okay, I take your point, though.
Yep.
A couple of other ones, just talking there, Kelvin, about your Help May Harm issue. The other side of that coin is what agencies those people are being linked with or have already been linked with, and you've partly sort of gone into that they've got homes, but you know, if you mentioned potential addiction problems, and there's usually mental health issues. Are those people that you've identified in all cases linked with those social service agencies or health agencies?
We take a collaborative approach, and we work in conjunction with, for example, mental health services in terms of making referrals wherever we can, whenever we can. So the aim is to link people with the services that they need.
Yeah, but specifically your Help May Harm, has that got the other side of the coin built into it? Yeah,
we're working together all the time with
Okay.
a group of agencies, and they are around the table in that marketing campaign as well.
Okay. The other one was to do with 1.3, the Tag Busters team. When that first started in this city, that was actually the result of one of the early or late 1990s work scheme programs that the government of the time ran, that we hooked into in quite a large way and got the Tag Busters off the ground before they were called Tag Busters, actually. And a lot of the people got employment, and still in employment in some cases, I think, that I'm aware of, through that start that they got with council doing that useful work for the community. I've just noticed that the government's announced the start-up of some new schemes, which probably haven't actually worked out physically when they're going to start, but they've announced they're going to. Is this an area that you are looking at or can look at, so that we can we've had trouble funding that to a sufficient sort of level in recent years since the schemes were all chopped by, I guess, the last government. Now that they're coming back in, is this an area that we can get into?
Not in a position to answer that. I haven't looked at it, but it's an area we can look at, and I'm happy to report back to you on that.
That'd be great. I just think there's opportunities there to help the community and to help the people that will be involved as well. Thanks.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Thank you, Andy, Debs and Kelvin. Would it be true to say that begging is only a small part of the bigger problem, as in drugs, mental illness, and other addictions with these guys?
It varies with people, but yes, there is a mix of rationale and background as to why people are present on our streets like that.
Okay. The other question is, like we are aware that we do have a problem in the central city here with the vagrants, but we do have a vocal business community in East Hamilton that do voice every now and then. As in the suburbs, is East Hamilton the only area experiencing the begging and the antisocial behaviour that gets reported to you?
No, it's spread across basically all the shopping areas across the city to varying degrees. We did some very recent research that going back the last 18 months. I know 27% of the calls for service that City Safe received came from Hamilton East, 20% came from Dinsdale, 19 from Five Crossroads, and 11% from Frankton, Davies Corner, and the Bader Ehrlich shops.
Okay, so these are reported ones. So how many calls in total?
468.
Okay. So with I know you're in close contact with police. What do the police statistics tell you about problems around the city, like East Hamilton and areas like that?
My last catch-up, I have a bi-monthly catch-up, was that things were remarkably static in terms of crime, that they're not being any additional calls for service in the areas that we're talking about.
Okay. To have the community patrollers now, they do a good job for the absolute lack of powers they do have in the central city here. What would it take to have a 7-day-a-week response from City Safe for the suburbs of Hamilton as well? Like, as in, how much would you think it would cost, and how many more people would you require in that City Safe unit?
Probably 5 additional, to have a if I understood your question correctly, I'm talking...
So it'd be mobile to go out to all the different areas?
To be a mobile patrol unit, a two-person patrol, 7 days a week, you'd want 5 staff.
Okay.
And if you're talking on a dollar amount, you're talking in the vicinity of $220,000 to $240,000
Per annum?
per annum.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Can I just confirm the dates in the action list are, sorry, I wasn't really clear either, Andy. They are starting dates, ending dates? They are end dates.
Ending.
Okay, so that action is deliverable date. Okay,
Yes. Yep.
I wasn't clear on that. Thank you. What's the, I think I've asked this before, on page 72, what's the Smart City office? And where will that be? Is that an office space we're going to pick up somewhere, or what's that about?
Smart City's an approach that's an international leader on how cities can be run, and part of that, it's a way of thinking, it's a practice, and part of that is we've been doing I've been on the Smart City group here in Hamilton and Council, which has been about actually what would it look like, what would a smart Hamilton look like, and what current or future projects are there in existence which would go to forming that. And this is about how do we do things smarter across the city, and so part of that is in having some form of base in a city.
When you mean smarter, You don't mean intellectually, you mean technology-based, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is intended that there will be a presentation on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think the CE certainly has been talking about smart city initiatives for quite some time. I'm not at all over the top of all of that, so hopefully... Oh, great, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll
It
understand
is on
actually
yes.
what that will mean. And all of these actions are funded from the relevant departments, aren't they? It's not
Correct.
just community or...
No.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's it. I'm happy to move, Mayor Andrew, when you're ready. Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Some of my questions have now been answered. Just the ones that remain is, I have had input into this, so thank you for that. I've attended most of the meetings. But the questions that remain with me, I guess, are around how we work around, these are all actions, how we work around perception. Your Harm May Help campaign is excellent, but that addresses a slightly negative activity, and how we will uplift the more positive perception of the city at the same time. I think that's quite important to me, because some of what we've been made aware of is more to do with how people perceive the central city to be, rather than how it might in actual fact be. So that's one question.
Just in terms of that, so 1.8 really talks about how do we do that? What's our plan? And so with our communications unit, we won't just be focusing on a negative issue. We will be focusing on Hamilton and the city and increasing that brand in that sense.
So that's quite timely to fit in with the item that we just had around the activation of our spaces. The other thing is that people tend to bandy the term homeless around, but really what concerns people is some of the loitering behaviour, having to move through Garden Place through groups of younger people or whomever who are hanging around out there doing whatever they do. So what is the activity, what's the action that's going to deal with, or how do we change the uncomfortableness around loitering? There's always going to be people loitering, but when you're the only person moving through a large group, it's quite uncomfortable.
If we go back to the previous item, we talked about the activation of Garden Place, for example, and one of the keys for that is if you have momentum and you have numbers of people, it's not anywhere near as apparent. There's a couple of things to manage in amongst that. Amongst the things is that the people are, if they are clustering or sitting around the seating that we've provided out there, they're quite entitled to be there, and we need to be, yes, that may not be the look that we ideally want, but if we get an activation in the space and we get sufficient throughput of people and activities, that is no longer as apparent and visible.
I agree. I don't think, I do agree that everyone has a right to be in that space. I don't think that's the kind of loitering that affects people. I'm wondering what we're going to do about through the walking zones where people have to walk through along the side of the buildings in particular. That's what makes people uncomfortable, because they cannot get from A to B without having to go through a group of people.
As from the 3rd of September, CitySafe will take over from a role that previously a security firm provided in the library, and that's an integrated approach that we now have with having a presence in the library and having a more permanent presence in and around Garden Place, and People's Project, HCBA, and all the activation space in there. So we're aiming to have a significantly enhanced presence for a start in Garden Place as part of that.
And so we'll have a watching brief on that, and if it doesn't move people along, we'll be looking at some other...
Correct.
Okay. And one other final... two more, sorry. On the page 72, the last point around improving lighting and cameras on Claudelands, Whitiora, Fairfield and Puketi. This is a central city safety plan, so I was a little bit surprised to see those in there, although I'm not saying they're not important. Why have they been given that priority in here?
That was added to the list because obviously this year Anzac Parade Victoria Bridge is going to have an upgraded lighting, and it's good for awareness that there are other bridges in the CBD, so Claudelands and Whitiora. And then we posed that if we just had those, the question might come, what about Fairfield and Puketi? So those, all those bridges are being done next financial year, so that's why that's there.
And they're all part of a CCTV connected network, which will be monitored centrally, will be part of actually having a better area of coverage. So it's part of a concentrated plan.
Okay, so to me it was just I wondered where they sat with the priorities, because we're getting all this, as other councillors have spoken to, what do we do about other shopping areas like Dinsdale, Hamilton East, and other areas where some issues are migrating to, since we're doing such a good job in the city. So, you know, whether the lights on the cameras on the bridges were as important as focusing on those other suburban shopping centres. I guess it's a matter of opinion, yeah?
So in terms of the improved lighting and installed CCTV, it was part of our 10-year plan agreement for transportation. So those things
So they're in the transport
they've
plan
been budgeted
anyway.
and they've been happening, whereas
Okay.
those new projects, they are not funded currently. Therefore, that's why this is in the list of actions that will happen rather than actions we hope might happen.
Okay, thank you. And one last one is nighttime activities. There isn't any, I did read it, but there isn't any specific mention of any activity that happens between 11 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And that has given us some pretty bad press when we first got here in this term. So is there an action to work with some of the owners of establishments? And I know we do work with the police. I know all that stuff's already happening, but to encapsulate it in here, because people are concerned about behaviour after 11 o'clock, and especially at 3 o'clock when all the clubs come out.
That's already an ongoing action which is already in existence, so that's not about trying to bring something else in.
I just sort of wanted it encapsulated. Did I miss it?
Well, okay, but 1.9, provide leadership and work collaboratively with key agencies and organisations on central city issues.
Because there's so many things like that, it's just easier to have one action, which is kind of a blanket for the collaboration that we do.
Okay, well, I might make a comment and debate on that, but that, yeah, thank you. That has answered my question. Thank you.
Can I just ask, the cameras that are proposed to go into the bridges, I see it's under transportation, so I presume they're going to have number plate good enough to recognise number plates on the vehicles. Will that cover the footpaths as well?
They will be the type of camera which will be pan, tilt, zoom, which means they can be manipulated to go in a range of directions.
The cameras will have the ability to read licence plate recognition. The question is whether or not we have the software to interpret it, and that's something we're currently working on. I don't think we do at this stage.
Not at the moment, we don't know.
No, but if we did need to go back and if the police needed to follow a vehicle movement.
Oh no, we're already doing that at the moment, and that'll be part of that network.
Yep. Okay. Thank
Sorry, Calvin. I get excited by that smart stuff.
Councillor Siggy.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Andrew. Just a question for clarification on page 71, 1.5. You talk about expanded network transport operations centre. So, and a full wall screen with real-time monitoring. Now, I remember we were at the centre. Wasn't that already there, or are you looking at more cameras, adding more cameras to bring into that full screen? Is that what you're talking about?
No, that was actually upgrading what we actually had there into a full video wall right across that wall there, rather than the half a dozen TV or large screens that we have. It will just become an integrated video wall.
Oh, okay, right, that's what that is. And we could project it out into one of these walls out in the city as well, so people could, no. Forget it, no. Good.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Obviously very, very comprehensive series of actions, and I know one or two things are unfunded, which we obviously need to come back and talk about. Tell us about the relationship and partnership with the New Zealand Police, and then I'll ask you some questions about our guys in terms of, you know, I'm thinking around that foot patrol, around the people, you know.
I'm not sure quite what your question is
Well,
there.
my question is, one would expect the New Zealand Police to be absolutely dedicated to working with you and receiving your wisdom to see how we can improve safety in the CBD in terms of
Deputy
core
Mayor,
function.
can you hone it down to a question,
No,
please, not
it's
debate?
a question.
No, it's debate. Just come up with a question,
It's
please.
a question.
What is the
I've just
question?
outlined, with respect, I've just outlined my innocent, genuine expectations of the New Zealand Police.
If I answer yes.
Yeah.
Seriously, we have a very close relationship. I have regular meetings with the leadership of the police, and they've recently got some additional staff, which is resulted in them having a greater foot presence in the
Right.
CBD in the earlier part of the week.
Yeah.
And greater presence on the streets on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night.
And the reason for that question is the notion of the kind of the reassurance, you know, like obviously if you see someone. With regard to our staff, could you talk about their kind of presentation uniform? Because again, you know, the city's safe, the help people, you know, if you need directions and again, can you just perhaps share that a wee bit with me, please?
Again, I'm not 100% sure
Well,
what
the question is about, the whole thing is, we obviously will have high-vis uniforms, we have a clear branding, and obviously the intent is staff to be available to assist, to answer questions, also to be part of reporting if we see some
Deputy Mayor, what's your
negative
question?
stuff. All right, this is really relevant because I'm just trying to give the context.
No, Deputy Mayor, I want a question, please.
Well, the question is very clear, outline the role of our city staff in terms of their physical presence and the kind of role they play, and this is what I'm saying is as a public help.
the uniform of City Safe is deliberately in, it's called mellow yellow,
Yeah.
which is so that particularly it's easily to spot, easily identifiable. It's also reflective of the same as what the police wear. So at night when you have City Safe and police out there, you have a sea of yellow, and this is an international research approach of how you should do that. In terms of your second part of your question, our people deal with the level of things that drop below what police are able to attend. And if it's a criminal matter, we adopt an eyes and ears and reporting criteria as the matter is reported to police, and we will provide updates and video footage. If it's at a lower level, our staff will intervene and engage on the basis of our deployment is based on a high visibility and high level of engagement. We have to be seen, and then we have to be seen to do something. And that's engaging with the business community, the general public, and what I call our at-risk community, or our vulnerable community, and engaging with them. And at the same, when you're dealing with the general public, you are everything from an ambassador, giving directions or whatever is required, or where the parking is or isn't, a whole range of events. Right through at the other end to we are doing direct intervention when we're getting the presence of aggressive begging or people playing up on the street.
And that's an excellent answer. That leads me to my next question, and this is in no way denigrating current training or the quality of our current people on the job, but obviously.
Moving on.
Well, this is with respect, Mr. Mayor. This is quite an important question around training, around the skill and the ability, because half of the success of this program will be the ability of our ambassadors to have all those interpersonal skills, to recognise conflict, non-conflict, all the things that the police have at a good level, by and large. And I'm just wondering if you could just reflect, because this came up in the previous council, where I guess, what is the kind of training regime, what are the kind of things you'll now be looking at with this new service, in terms of the quality of the people, and I'm not in any way detracting from the people currently there, but this is quite an important role which requires important interpersonal skills.
We have a significant training and enhancement criteria. Firstly, in terms of the selection criteria, we're looking for certain skill sets that around being able to have high level of engagement. There is a detailed training process that they go through, which amongst a range of things is de-escalation, engaging with people at risk. They do the mental health 101 training. They go off and do a separate 2-day tactical communication and situational awareness training. In the past, we've received some specialist dealing with homeless training from an overseas professional who was passing through the area. We do a lot about keeping ourselves safe. There is a detailed manual if you need more.
No, and obviously given your own history, you'll be right across it, but thank you, that's a good answer, thank you. Yeah.
There's an ex-police officer that's part of the group as well.
It's all right, thank you.
Moved by councillor Angela, seconded by councillor Paula. We'll move to debate. Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew, and thanks team for your work on the action plan. I don't think there's anything that you've missed out of those meetings that we had, so thank you so much for your work. My primary focus will be on the first action, which is reviewing our levels of service for the City Safe. I'll be looking for an extended service, and you're going to be bringing that to us in the annual plan. We may be starting those by December this year, so that's really great. I think that the council is very much focused on safety for the city, for the whole of city, not just the central city, although these actions are around the central city primarily. But we are we mustn't lose focus that the people that are perceived to be out on the street that cause other members of the public to feel unsafe at times are the vulnerable people in this story. And there are elected members around here, certainly Councillor Hamilton and Councillor McPherson, who deal in those communities, so know what I'm talking about. So those people mustn't be left out of this story. And I think some of the concerns that I've heard from some members offline around some of the actions, and that we perhaps could go a little bit further or harder or faster, can often have unintended consequences for those vulnerable people. The recent trip to Christchurch that some of us took for the local government conference was an absolute eye-opener, and we mustn't lose sight of actually how far that our city has come. Outside of their Hotel Ibis in the middle of the day were beds and mattresses set up for, I think there were around 5 to 7 people that were clearly sleeping on the street right outside a hotel. We have moved away from that. We have picked up significant support from the community, and our issue just is minor compared to Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland and Tauranga are experiencing some tremendous impact on their city spaces and their suburbs with this issue. So we mustn't lose sight of that. For me, this is about all people feeling safe in all parts of our city, and I think that we need to champion and support when that proposal comes back, and I think that's where the will of council will be going, to expand the service of City Safe officers, because nowhere else in the country has as highly trained, highly visible, highly dedicated team of City Safe officers where their only function is city safety. So I really look forward to that proposal. It's going to cost us a little bit of money, but I think that it will definitely be worth it. So thank you for that.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
This is a 5-minute debate, isn't it? Thank you.
You already had respect.
No. No, seriously. Look, I endorse everything that Councillor O'Leary...
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry.
No, that wasn't agreed to.
What is it?
This is a 2-minute debate.
Well, that's a shame.
Sorry, but I wrote down... I wrote down what
well, can I start
Rob
again
asked
then?
for.
I have to rearrange my speech to do 2 minutes.
So just to be fair, could we reset the clock, please?
Thank you.
And can you talk very fast?
Yep. Right. I obviously endorse everything that Councillor O'Leary has said, and particularly around spreading out this service, and I'm thinking Frankton, Hamilton East and other areas. Obviously, there's a different dynamic with companies owning shopping malls, which is their thing, but certainly, and I think there'll be a series of building blocks, and it seems to me, to grow the service based on the, I think the reason I asked the questions around the training was obviously we all have our experiences, and for mine it was 10, 12 years ago where I went out on a night patrol, and the big take-home lesson that night was just how amazing the young police officers were in conflict resolution and lowering temperature, and then obviously making the call whether they came back the next day because there was a domestic issue, which they would then follow up, but to go in at that time wasn't quite the time, and those kind of things, being in a bar, a whole lot of things, one wrong word, one sort of bad, aggressive, it would have set the whole thing off. And that's where I'm saying that I'm not wanting to put huge burden on our city safety team, but just that training. And Councillor Casson said, you know, how well, obviously we've got some really good police professional training around this whole project in our own right. And I do pick up Councillor O'Leary's observation of other cities. I will argue, like it or not, you know, there's limited budget for tax. Like it or not, this is core city activity. It's about community safety. This is, like it or not, around good partnerships. And this actually, if you look at the blend of ratepayer money, tax money, etc., this, if we get it right, the outcomes for a whole range of reasons can be really good. And so I'll be looking forward to, obviously, which you'll do, the regular reporting, how it goes. And certainly I agree with Councillor Leary. I do think we're going to have a heavy, substantive debate about rolling this project out to some of our other suburban centres.
Excellent, Mark. You did it right on time.
Yes, thank
Councillor Paula.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew, and I want to acknowledge Councillor O'Leary for her chairing of this group. I attended even though I wasn't a member, because, you know, I have to have my say. And it's been a very good and inclusive process, so I'm very grateful for that. I will say, I think overall it's a very good landing point. Always there'll be differences of opinions on detail. The only thing that concerns me the most is that, and I did raise it but didn't get my own way in this one, but never mind, was that that nighttime activity should not be hidden in a generalised activity action, because it is one of the issues that concerns people, so they need to, when they read this, see where it sits. But that's my opinion, and I accept that not everybody will share it. Absolutely 100% behind the other speakers who've talked about the other areas. Crime and antisocial behaviour has migrated and will continue to migrate until we tackle with the causes of that behaviour. We can't do it all. We do need our partners, the police, alongside us in that, because quite often they're ahead of some of those trends before we are. That's what they do on a daily basis. Watch crime, know what's happening. But yes, I think all shopping centres across the city need to be safe, or be perceived to be safe, for people to go, because most people do attend their local shopping centre more regularly than they come into town. And so I think that's a very important part to me. But yes, congratulations to staff on a good plan. And Angela, actually, by the way, is absolutely correct. We saw it in Christchurch, and Tauranga Council, the chairperson of community, has been in touch with me only a few days ago, and I'm going to pass his details on to Councillor O'Leary, because he wants to know what we're doing that is better than Tauranga, because they do have people permanently sleeping under the awnings of the streets, and that used to be once upon a time a very successful commercial area. So.
Councillor Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Look, just very quickly, thank you very much for this report, and there's a lot of action going on here in a lot of areas, and it's great the way that it's spread across all the various council departments. It's really good. I agree, the City Safe, I think they're a real, success story for this council and differentiates us from other councils, and I'll be very interested in discussions about extending what City Safe does. I feel begging is probably still letting us down a little bit in the city, and I totally understand that this is something that we share with a lot of cities, and there's no easy answer, and probably what Calvin says about getting more people into the CBD is about the best solution anyone's got at the moment. But for me, it's still always a question mark. I feel, personally, I've got an interest in lighting in the CBD and doing something different there, and so I'll follow that up in a different forum. But thank you very much. It's good.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Thank you, Debs, Kelvin, Andy and Angela for this, with all the work you've done. And look, a big thank you to the amount of work in the Central City Safety Plan and the amount of work that the City Safe staff do themselves with, like I said before, very limited powers that they do, but they do do a good job. Look, we've got a great working relationship now with the New Zealand Police here in Hamilton, who are themselves resource poor but intention rich. So, you know, if they could attend everything, they would, but they can't. And hopefully, in Martin Gallagher's words, the new government will give them the staffing they need. Look, I think it's vitally important we extend the City Safe operation to 7 days so that they can do a mobile service to the different shopping centres around Hamilton so that we can cover the city better. But obviously they're going to need extra funding for that, so I think it's very important we actually look at that funding model again so we can get the funding we need for City Safe. You know, it's a poor situation where we as a city have to provide safety officers where the police are resource poor. You know, they do the same in London, some of the suburbs of London, where they have police volunteers who are like police prospects who want to join the police. They go out and work under the police umbrella, fully funded by the police. Now, to have a safe and happy community out there in Hamilton, we have to be able to, people have to be able to feel safe in their own homes, but not only their own homes, they have to feel safe when they go into public areas. So I think, like I said before, it's vitally important that we extend the City Safe service and our Central City plan to encompass a Hamilton plan where we can actually provide that service in the suburbs that the police can't always provide. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Just a quick shout out and plug for Councillor Angela. At the local government conference in Christchurch, she did a really fantastic job of promoting the work that Hamilton's done in this space in partnership with Julie Nelson of the People Project. They only had about 4 minutes each to speak, but did a very good job. And it's pleasing to see, Councillor Paula, that it's already had a ripple effect and they're seeking feedback. So well done, and to all the team as well for the work you guys are doing.
Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton and other councillors for your comments. I think we must always remember as well that this is fairly new. The people that we're seeing, the vulnerable people in our community that we are seeing on the streets is fairly new in our country, and actually isn't something that we as a city council have done or haven't done. This is a result of previous governments, of government funding, of changes in direction in terms of the services available and the funding available for people with addiction and mental health problems. So I think that this council can be really proud of the work that we've done in particular, and the fact that other cities are still looking at us, because they are now experiencing things that we experienced and had an issue with in 2014. So we can only build on the success that we have. So thank you to all my colleagues for the comments today.
To vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Item 10, page 73, the Te Hikawai slip. Thank you, Maria and Zeke. Maria, I'll just get you to introduce Zeke, or Zeke, introduce yourself, just in case members aren't familiar with exactly where you fit in.
Okay, so good afternoon, Mayor Andrew and elected members. So I have Zeke Fisk with me, who is our team leader of Urban Landscapes, and he is charged in one of his many duties with working through some of our slip issues. So I just would like to take the opportunity to, since the report was confirmed, Zeke has been having conversations with Regional Council about what their level of contribution may be to this solution and potential solutions at Kirikiriroa and at Days Park for the erosion control there. So Zeke's met with the catchment manager, and they are to conduct some site visits and determine what, if any, funding is available, but it is looking positive. Otherwise, we'll open up to questions.
Zeke, would you like to add anything?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Angela.
On the button today, aren't I? Hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks, team, and Zeke, congratulations on your new role. Yeah, I'll miss seeing you at the playgrounds openings. And we planted a tree many years ago, Zeke and I, and a maple tree, I think it was. Anyway, I digress. Is anyone from Tonkin and Taylor here, or you happy to answer questions on their report? So in their report it says that the remedial works for 2014 were not completed. I couldn't find anywhere in the report as to tell me why. This is on page 77, Councillor's second paragraph. It said that the November slip wasn't, in a similar way to the 2013 remedial works, but wasn't, then down the bottom says these works were not completed. I don't know which slip was not completed, but something wasn't. Can you tell me what that was and why?
So my understanding was that there were some issues with the iwi consultation in Heritage New Zealand, NAMTOC. That process didn't go as smoothly as we would have liked, and it caused a halt to the works.
And so we never... that was it, it was stopped. Was that reported back to council?
I couldn't tell you, I'm sorry, I'd have to look into it.
Okay. I'm a little bit confused on, I know that the staff are recommending option 3. There are no other, there's no other commentary other than option 4 or option 5 would be a much higher construction cost. And options 1, 2, 3 in the report still, in the Tompkins-Taylor report, still say that they have a higher risk of failure than a fully engineered solution. So why have staff, other than cost, if you put cost aside, if cost wasn't an issue, and I know of course it is, would you still be recommending we do option 3, given that it still has a higher risk of failure?
Yes, we would, Councillor. It's a consistent approach we've taken in other places in the city. So we feel it would, though there is still a higher risk than an engineered solution, we feel it still would provide us with future proofing.
And I'm assuming from on page 79, the potential remedial options that Tompkins-Taylor have given us go in chronological order. So the best possible option is option 5?
Yes.
Although option 4, which is just the soil nails on the upper bank, when you look at the columns and hazards not addressed, option 4 says there are no hazards that aren't. So that almost reads like that's the better option.
Yeah, when you weigh it all up, option 4 and 5, as I understand them, present some risk because we would then enter into agreement with the neighbouring private property, and it could set us up for some liability on that piece of land in the future. So when on balance, option 3 provides a reasonable assurance of risk without inviting the other risk.
Okay, that makes sense, because I just couldn't find any common ground for me to figure that out. And so the cost of this is 180,000, and we don't have a budget for that because we made that decision during the LTP, which I'm not sure was quite the right decision, but I understood why we did it. Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Yeah, I'm perhaps coming from the same place that Angela just has been in regards to those other more more likely to succeed for longer options afterwards. Because there's no cost there for them, I find it really difficult to make a judgment, because I would prefer that we bit the bullet and made the better decision long term. But if it's going to be $10 million, well, yeah, but we don't even have a ballpark there. And the other, so maybe some comment on that, Maria. The other issue is the regional council funding. Is that I can't remember the name of the fund that everyone in Hamilton pays into, a few dollars a year. What's it called?
Project Watershed.
So that's where it's coming from. And there's been, there's been a lot of complaints around this council about not much being spent in that area in Hamilton City for quite a long time. So how much is available from there? Would that help us actually achieve one of the better results? And what happened to the Project Waterside Shed Committee, Hamilton Subcommittee, that we used to have a representative on and made joint decisions? That may have been before your time, but we did definitely have a representative for many years on that, so we could participate. So I'm trying to tease out whether we can, with their help, afford to do a better one. So any comments in that area, please?
Okay, so if I can address your first issue, perhaps. Tompkins Taylor had provided us with a range of options.
Yeah.
As you'll appreciate, anything we ask them to identify more adds extra cost and time to a project. What we know about some of our other areas in the city is that when you start talking about soil nails and then working with adjacent landowners and add some legal issues, you probably start at about $500,000 and it can go north of that quite rapidly. Depending on how far into the property, and then, as I said, the potential for extra liability in going into that neighbouring property and setting ourselves up to have to continue to maintain that piece.
Though, just on that, we've had issues where the bank's fallen down and collapsed some of the neighbours' property without soil nails, and we've still ended up paying for that, have we not, along the river pathway?
Well, our new approach that we had direction from elected members last year was that practice ceases, and if we don't have an asset to maintain or a liability, then we wouldn't be pursuing repairs in those situations.
Except in the cases, what about where, and I can recall one of these down towards the golf course somewhere where it was alleged by the property owner that us creating the path made it higher risk of a slip and had something to do with it.
And that's where the liability, and we get Tompkins Wake advice on a case-by-case basis. So, you know, if we have done something to increase the liability, then yes, we would have to be involved in a remediation option that may protect only private property. But if we've not contributed and we have no land to protect, then our stance has been that we don't take any action.
Okay. So Project Watershed?
So Project Watershed, through the Central Catchment Committee, and Eva-Lisa might be able to help me out here, but my understanding is that we still do have representation and staff attend the catchment.
But not elected members, because we used to have one elected member on.
It's my understanding at the last council meeting, under the terms of reference, an elected member has under the catchment, but generally there is an elected member, and I think Councillor Southgate was the previous elected member.
Oh, okay.
But and is still the elected member that is on that committee, and so we do have an elected member representation.
I hadn't picked that up, sorry. So do you know how much they've got in the central? Oh yeah, because they do it by catchment, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll have quite a sizable fund in the central, but they also have some criteria attached to what they will and won't fund, and that's what the site walkovers are about, because we've indicated that we currently have 3 sites that we would be interested in partnering with some funding there. So they are wanting to check those sites and the works to make sure that it does meet the criteria for the funding. So.
But it's a joint, we've got people on the committee, so it's a joint committee, it's not just the regional council?
Well, the regional council are charged with administering the fund, so, yeah.
That's not administering the fund, but not making the decisions alone, are they, or? Yeah.
So I've been on this committee for a very long time now. I did actually try to hand it off to anybody else who might be interested, just saying it. But I have, what they do is they have a 10-year horizon of funding across the catchment, which is approved by WRC. So that's the envelope. WRC decide how much the central zone will get for its activities because they rate for it. Out of that, they have an agreement with Hamilton City Council where a proportion of that money comes and is managed within house by ourselves to determine what's useful for the central city. And by and large, that has worked very well, but these are out of the usual scale and scope, this work. This was not necessarily anticipated, so there's been a lot of catchment work being done in the city, but then we've had these weather incidents, and that are a lot more huge than you would have anticipated. So the Central Catchment Committee are just getting their head around now what that means and whether there needs to be an adjustment of the budget to assist Hamilton to deal with these issues. And there may be some negotiation about what else in the plan doesn't get done. But there's only one voice at the council in terms of the table in terms of a vote, and it's mine, and I'm supported by staff at a technical level. The rest of the committee needs to be appraised of it and needs to understand the reason for the work and why it's so important. And remember, I am just one vote. One of the methods we could use to increase that is to maybe have at a senior leadership level, and the Mayor could also write to Regional Council expressing his support or concern around some issues that would elevate the support for it, if I might suggest. And yeah, once a year they have a very big workshop where all these things are in the mix. So don't know quite how it'll land in terms of, I think they have understood it's a fairly significant, especially the Hikawai one, they've understood the significance of it for the city. It'll be a matter of funding.
Thanks for that. Could we have maybe at a future community services meeting a little report on how much is available and how it's envisaged to work from here on in, just so we can refresh ourselves on that?
Probably better for your committee, but we can arrange it.
Fine, yep. Because I just think we've never had a really good handle, or not since it first started in this council on it.
No, that's quite true.
So if I could add, there was councillors did request that staff report into on how the Regional Council's project watershed funding works, and that is scheduled as a GM update for the GNI committee on the 4th of September.
Oh, good.
So if we're wanting to actually, so we can actually include some of that information in that report.
That'll do. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
The funding from the catchment committee that's just been talked about, where is that, sorry for my ignorance, where is that funding from? What's the source of that funding?
Waikato Regional Council, I assume it's rates collection.
It's a rate on Hamilton City residents.
So it's a Hamilton rates fund that particular catchment?
Rates that they collect.
Rates that they collect from Hamilton?
Sorry, it's a catchment-wide collection. So it's targeted across the catchment, not just Hamilton. So it includes that's my understanding. Yeah, so it's Waipa and parts of Waikato and whatever that boundary of catchment is. So they do it as a targeted rate, catchment by catchment. And actually, each of those catchment committees do have a bit of a conversation about levels of service as well. So some catchments are prepared to put more rates in post, and others are less prepared to rate.
So I think for that briefing, I'd be really interested to get a figure of what actually comes from Hamilton resident ratepayers through the Regional Council rate. I'd also be interested in finding out, just getting my head around the criteria, and does that take account into public amenity and enjoyment? So if you have a highly used pathway, is that a factor in terms of people being able to have public access as against a more remote, still urgent, more remote one? Are there any other funding sources for this type of stuff?
Not that we're aware of, Martin.
If we go with option 3, and you know, because obviously our objective is to try and get the river path reopened for public enjoyment and access, what sort of a rough timeline are we looking at this point?
So at this point, staff are ready to go with procurement process, and it would be our aim to have it open this side of Christmas. Yeah. Hence why we're not waiting to hear about the regional council funding. It has been closed for a period of time, and we're very keen to reopen it.
Cool. I guess, and probably just I'll give you notice. I'll be looking forward at the GNI a good descriptive of our value for money for a regional council and our regional rate, given their far-sighted vote on the Regional Facilities Fund. What an incredible progressive outfit they are. But I just want to sort of tease out, in terms of our catchment, our gully system, our rivers, it's just a bit of a tease out of what are other potential projects, acknowledging Paula's representation, but it may be really useful that you help us, because I don't want to come off an ill-informed platform, but I certainly would value us doing having some really good knowledge as to how we could actually review that whole point and have a comfort as to what the Progressive Regional Council is doing.
Councillor is...
On board, I've just asked some through the chair. All I've done is for that committee meeting, I've just asked some points of discussion, and you're taking that on
Okay,
board.
Deputy Mayor.
Good.
The silence woke the room up.
No, it's all right. Fine.
Councillor Leo.
Is the Deputy Mayor finished, is he?
Yes.
Okay.
We've got an answer to the question too.
This slip occurred back in April last year, and at about the same time there was another slip which was on the northern side of the walkway bridge, and that one, that property actually was on Munro Place. I noticed over the summer that the Munro Place job was repaired with a timber retaining wall. Why has, and to me, that one looks steeper than the Te Hikawai one. I get probably asked at least twice a week, when the hell are you going to fix that walkway? Because people are still using it. There's no two ways about that. And I'm a little bit guilty of that myself at times. What was the cost, do we know, of repairing the one which was on Munro Place?
Sorry, Councillor, not off the. I'd have to look into that to find the cost.
Okay.
But in relation to your other point, so we have done some different thinking around our slip repairs, and I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with one of our engineering firms and said, look, these things are taking extraordinary amounts of time, and so we've agreed that perhaps we need to pose a different question to them at the front end, rather than what is the long-term solution for this site, what can we do in the next 3 months to get this site, because engineers respond, as I've learnt, to very specific questions, and if you ask them to give a final solution, they'll go and work on that. But so we have had some learnings, and that'll be one of the approaches that we take, is actually, are there solutions we can implement now that would get this path open, and then work on the longer term.
There's a new subdivision which is going in just past Munro Place, first on your left. There's a big new subdivision going in there. And I notice there's a huge place just framed up at the moment. Is there a limit as to how close you can actually build to the riverbank? Because this one seems to be right on the riverbank, more or less overhanging the river.
So there are some parts of the riverbank that we don't own the Esplanade Reserve. Normal process would be that we do obtain Esplanade Reserve as a part of a subdivision process, but there are a few little pockets up and down the river where we haven't got that and have not been able to obtain it. In the district plan, you'll see a natural hazard layer, which relates to the Waikato River and the Esplanade Reserve.
So if you have a property on the river who pays for the repair to the slip?
So our approach has been where we've had Esplanade Reserve, which quite frankly disappeared, and we've had neighbouring residents asking us to fund remediation to protect their properties, and we have held firm on the stance that we have no land to protect in the interests of our public, and we would not be entering an agreement to pay for repairs that would only benefit individual landowners.
Okay. So I take it that this is going to be open prior to Christmas, is that right?
That is certainly what we're aiming for.
Thanks.
Councillor Leo, I'm just interested with your background, how you can be a little bit guilty.
Because there is a big fence which prohibits people.
No, but a little bit guilty. I thought that would be a direct line.
I walked up to the slip to inspect it, and when I was there, I returned via but I had to go through a closed part of the river path to actually get the inspection carried out. I did have a hard hat on and a high-vis jacket on at the time. So
that sounds like you were not guilty. Councillor Robb.
I was just asking you if the dog also had the high-vis and the helmet on too. Look, my questions are around paragraph 18 and also the follow-on from Councillor Leo's questions. Just on that CE delegation, I thought the CE delegation was 100,000, but obviously I've forgotten, or it's much higher, obviously. 250, is it? Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. You mentioned in the next sentence, this work will be funded from the existing reactive maintenance budget. How big is that budget, and is it? I guess the line of questioning will be around: does it contain sufficient to cover what we anticipate to be an ever-increasing cost of these events?
So the short answer to that question would be probably not, and that was a conscious decision that was made due to the unpredictable nature of these events. This one is a little bit unusual in that it is operational funding, so there's no fixed hard assets that we can capitalise from the repair of this slip. We have a total parks reactive maintenance budget of around 510,000. So we're at the start of a financial year, so to take 180 off that is doable at this point.
Yep.
However, if we were to receive a series of storm or weather events with multiple trees down across the city further on in the year, that will diminish our ability to absorb the cost.
Further costs, okay. And just to follow on from Councillor Leo's questions, does council protect itself against slippage where there might be an event that involves private land? And I'm thinking here that of the example he gave of the house he thinks is almost hanging over the river, that somewhere in our permit, at the time that the permit's granted, the property owner, or maybe there's something on the title that protects council against a future claim. The reason I'm asking that is that if Peacock goes ahead and is successful, there's going to be quite a lot of clifftop houses in that particular subdivision in future, which potentially are going to be susceptible to movements in the riverbank.
Yeah, and I think we did cover that during the briefings on slips. Again, the short answer is that we do our very best to protect ourselves there, and there is natural river hazard overlays in the district plan. If we were, it's how far do you go and how much investigation do you want to invest in to uncover potential, and yeah.
Well, I know, and I'm just speaking from personal experience here, I know my beach house at Waihi Beach, there's a 50-page report attached to the limb about the potential for the sea coming over the top of the sand dunes and entering my section, which is, most unlikely. But I think what the council's done there has created this hazard zone and made it very clear to any potential purchaser that if you buy that property, there's a risk, and that risk is that certainly that we're not going to be liable for your house being washed away by the sea or however, whatever event occurs. So I'm just, you know, and this might not be necessarily a topic solely for today, but whether it is something that council should be looking at seriously as weather patterns change, that there's potentially a lot more vulnerability out there, and we often become the last man standing when somebody comes back and says, oh, but you gave me a permit to build here, and I've done that and I've complied with the permit, but now the river or the bank's washed away my house.
So it might be helpful if I could suggest that it could be timely that I recirculate some of the information that came to elected members during the SLIPS briefing, and then, you know, if there are further questions, then we can sort that out at a separate briefing. If that...
Yeah, although I do remember the discussion. I guess I'm keen to know what we've done about it in terms of, you know, going forward, what council is doing in that regulatory area to mitigate the possibility that we could. And I have seen the Munro Place one, and it got very, very close, I think, to a private property, and I think there was a swimming pool and all the other things that were sort of hanging close to the edge of the property.
I think when it's coming down to talking about council's legal position, liability, regulatory and so forth, it's probably a conversation I'm more comfortable having in a PX environment, Councillor Pascoe, than having in an open environment. At this point in time,
I'm just signalling, really, you know, are we doing something in that space? And it may well be that that's the next logical step, rather than for us necessarily just to get back what we've already discussed in terms of, because I think the next step is to resolve how council might mitigate against potential claims that might come about.
Yeah, and I think that is a conversation for recirculate that information, a little bit more research in the specific area, and probably a briefing to councillors at that point in time. It's probably not appropriate to have as an open conversation at this point in time.
Thank you.
Could I ask, Mayor, through the Chair, a couple of us have said that they don't feel there's quite enough information to make this choice. To receive the report is essentially to endorse the Chief Executive going ahead with option 3, but there's some feeling, I don't know how widespread it is, that if we knew how much the other one cost, the option 4 or 5 cost, then we could make a better decision whether we did want to go down that track or not. It's not sort of giving us that option at all in this report. Not comfortable with receiving a report when I sort of not being given any option. I don't even know why it's coming to us, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it came here through previous discussions that we held at the Finance Committee that basically flagged a level of interest in slips and what the financial consequences were. So this is about being transparent. Generally, I would just get on and do it within my delegated authority based on previous discussions we've had.
Yeah, clearly we want it done, but if you stick hessian on the side and plants and a rain event in a month washes it out, we're going to be left looking pretty silly. On the other hand, if it was going to cost $10 million to do something else, then probably it's worth the risk. But I can't assess whether it's worth the risk here with this information. You know, so why are your staff bringing this to us? Exactly.
I think I've explained.
So,
well, then I vote against receiving the report, which is silly, because I don't agree with the proposed outcome. At this point, I don't have enough information to agree with it.
So if councillors want, we're happy to go away and talk to Tonkin and Taylor just about I think what you're saying, Councillor Dave, is that you want some, more ballpark figures of what options 4 and 5 might cost, and if it's, a range of 4 to 5 million, then, you know, that would make a difference in decision making for elected members. So,
Well,
Maria,
that's my opinion. I'm not
Yeah,
trying to. I know
I'm-
Angela has raised
yeah.
some similar questions, and coupled with that, how much we might get from the project watershed as well.
And I'd also include an indication of how extended the timeframe and potential risk with the neighbouring and the par site. Whether,
I don't think anyone's trying to hold up the work, but you know, if we could get the silver-plated job done in some affordable way, then I imagine at least some councillors would prefer we went that direction.
is that doable, Maria, to talk to Tonkin and Taylor to get those reasonably quickly? And then we can get it on an agenda pretty quickly, so we'll just, I think I'd go to a range of places, whether it's CNS or GNI or whatever. I think we can do that. There's a number of committee and council meetings coming up if elected members are comfortable with that.
Can we ensure this comes back for the next council meeting?
Well, they were
Because
suggesting it earlier than that, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
no
have a look
later
at the
than the next
timeframes.
council meeting.
we've got
Sorry?
No later than the next council meeting.
So can we amend the resolution to say that we, rather than that we receive report A, B, that staff report back on alternative options, costs and related matters no later than the next council meeting? Got that?
Yeah.
May I make a suggestion? Because by receiving the report, you do exactly what you were alluding to before, Dave, which the implicit intent of the report is that the CE exercise delegated authority, so a procedural motion might be simpler, achieve exactly the same outcome.
Okay, the
More
report
safely.
lie. No, because we don't want this report to lie on the table, we want a new report.
Yeah.
Or new information.
Yeah, so I can draft something up.
necessarily have to affect my delegation, so I have plenty of other things to do, so I'll wait until the report comes back.
So we'll just put a procedural motion that further information is coming on this matter, so it's not just this report that reflects this conversation to another meeting no later than the next council meeting.
I'll move that.
seconded by me. All those for? Any against? All those for? Any against? Carried. Okay, no, I want to keep going here and just get this cleaned up so that, so can we move on to item 11, page 90?
Here and his appointments at 1, he may not finish that until 2, he said.
That's why I'm taking it now,
So
so
it
then,
might be better to have a bit of a buffer after the lunch as well. This was what, if you did them all now, then we've got no choice but to go straight into his items when we come back, and that might be just a bit quick.
what I was looking at doing is bring item 11 and see how we're going for time for item 12, which then gives Mark plenty of time to get back for his item. I normally wouldn't do this, but it's particularly the rubbish is Mark's
No, that's
task
exactly
force.
why we're suggesting an alternative. That we leave ourselves a buffer after that.
If you're 45
Oh, I
minute
see,
lunch,
for after lunch.
Yeah.
45-minute lunch,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
you've
got it.
still got buffer.
Yeah,
for
okay.
him.
So
In
we'll,
case it takes longer
yeah,
for him.
yeah, so we'll stop for lunch till 2 o'clock.
Yeah, sorry.